Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again here with part 3 of my reaction to Mr. John Stryker Meyer, MACV SOG, The Secret War in Vietnam on the Sean Ryan Show. So let's jump back in.
To graduate from Como. It took a while, but we made it.
But what was so you wanted to go to Vietnam?
Yeah, I seen all the war movies. You grew up with the Duke and everybody else with their war movies and God and Country.
So what was it like for you getting trained by special ops guys that are coming back from Vietnam?
I just felt like I was in an element that it was new and different. For me, it was so far out that I was just happy to be able to, every time I graduated to the next phase, kind of like, whew, we made it, I kept waiting for them to say, like that recruiter, you're lucky, we lowered the standards. Somebody's going to come along and have a reality check and say, how the hell did you get in here this far? Get out of here. Go be a cook somewhere at the leg unit,
I love how he speaks about that feeling when you get past, we get to progress on each phase. That's what it was like after selection, for me anyway, and that's what it was like after every course on the reinforcement or on the reinforcement cycle of training in both NZ and Australia. So had the same feeling after getting through selection, same feeling getting through course after course. Obviously, I was pretty deflated at the end of the NZ cycle. In Australia, same feeling getting through the selection and then course after course on the cycle and then ultimately getting right through. But it's I can relate to what he's talking about when he's mentioning they've been trained by veterans, SF operators as well that have been deployed on operations and receiving their tutelage, I suppose, for want of a better term, and their guidance and the expectation, getting an understanding of the expectations required to be in a unit like that.
I kept waiting for that, but we kept going on and we made it through.
How'd they treat you guys?
It was different. It wasn't like basic AIT and jump school. There, they gave you rules. You had to abide by them. Whatever they told you to do, you had to do it. But they also, if you asked a question, a lot of times they would answer the question. And it just felt like they were training us to go to Vietnam. And we knew that we had this mission against communism. We had seen what communism had done in Hungary. We had seen and heard about things in Russia, and we heard about Mao Tse-tung. We never realized just what a brutal killers they were of their own people, mass murderers effectively, but we knew communism sucked. We saw Fidel Castro and what happened to Cuba. And so we knew that we were up against the forces of darkness at that time, and we're training for that. And at that time, the Green Berets, only thing we knew about were the Green Beret A teams that went over. So you had an A team, there would be a senior medic and a junior medic, and for all the MOSs, and then you'd have the team leader, and then there'd be an officer who'd be a captain, and then there'd be an executive officer.
Is that where that TV series, The A-Team, came from then? I remember it well. I remember B.A. Baracus, Mr. T is probably and I remember vividly, vaguely I should say, a couple of the other characters in that TV series. I thought it was cool what little I can remember of it, but I've not seen it in a long, long time. But is that where the A-Team came from, the Green Berets? If you know, let me know. All right.
But the team sergeant ran the team, but there'd be that delicate balance between them. So that's what we trained up for. It was A teams going to Vietnam. And through that training, we came finally to the FTX. You put together your first A team without the officers. And we would go in as a team, we had missions, the commo guys, we had to set up the wires. And of course, here's Army training. This is December 1967. Our training is in the Uwharrie National Forest in North Carolina. It's snowed. We had like a foot of snow for our training prior to going to Vietnam, which is like the perfect oxymoronic WTF situation. You know, it's like, what? We're going to go to Nam and we're here in the snow? And of course, my Texas buddy who had helped me get through with the orientation, we were in the combo together, and he was my joint mate. We were supposed to take turns sleeping. Well, he fell asleep on his watch. The instructor came by, tore down our tent, kicked our ass, put us out in the snow. We survived it. Got through, had to put up the antenna, and we jumped. Our jump, so we finally jumped at night, and we jumped at night at 800 feet.
Man, just listening to that, they're lucky that they, well, I shouldn't say lucky. I don't know what their process and stuff was like, but falling off to sleep while you're supposed to be on sentry is a huge no-no. Anywhere, not just SF. Like, it's one of those things that you just don't do. But from my experience and my thoughts anyway, because thankfully I was not sleeping when I was on sentry, but along with other guys, especially when you're going through that process too. But there's a lot riding on that. And although, yes, it may be training, it's still a big no-no, regardless of where you are. But what I was going to say is that it's a bit more forgiving than the conventional space. If you were during training, that is more forgiving. If you were during training to, doze off, you might get treated like that. You might maybe have to rip your hoochie down or your cover and then just lie out in whatever the weather is. But in an SF setting, I think, I know for myself and many others, we likely felt that if we fell off to sleep when we're supposed to be on sentry, picket, on watch, whatever you want to call it, we probably wouldn't be staying there. It would, it was not something that you wanted to do or be caught doing.
And that's a pretty close jump. I mean,
Yeah.
the only ones I heard about some of your programs, some of the guys from today, when they jump at 400 feet. And we had a couple of guys later on with SOG, we had 5 halo jumps into Laos. And then we had 12 or 13, depending who you talk to, static line jumps, some in Laos and then some in South Vietnam when they were supporting aid camps that were under siege. But they would talk about jumping at 500 feet, no reserve, because you just go out, the string pulls, and you're landing. And in my case, 800 feet happened really quick because I was the commo guy. So you had your parachute, an emergency parachute, your equipment bag, your M14 bag, and then we had an additional bag because we had to carry. Our radio was we called the Angry 109, and you used that for Morse code. And
man, that's a lot of kit. I can only imagine. Like there's what do you say is M14 bag plus another bag, all the comms kit, all your ammunition, all your food, water. That's heavy, man. And jumping out, what do they say, 500 feet? I'm not sure what that translates to in meters. Sorry, I'll have a look later.
And in order to get that radio, you had to have a handheld generator that sat on a metal frame that you sat on. So you would have somebody would sit there cranking the generator, and then you put the antenna up and communicate back to base. So you have that metal seat, the generator, which was heavy, complete with the handles, and then the radio, plus the M14, and plus other equipment, sleeping bag, and stuff like that. So when he jumped, I jumped heavy and jumped out, and just by the grace of the Lord again, there was one little road, and I came out, the wind took me, and I landed, did a PLF there, and went and did the FTX, the field training exercise. We were out there for 5 or 6 days and nights, got through it, came back for some final classes, and it was around, I don't know, December 14th, 15th, somewhere around there. This is graduation. Here's your certificate. Congratulations. Here's your pass for a leave for Christmas. In our case, the commo guys, there was a bunch of us that went TDY to Fort Gordon, Georgia for 12 weeks of radio teletype because the aid camps needed And of course, we didn't know it, but SOG needed communicators with top secret clearance to run the radio teletype.
Did you know what SOG was at the time?
We'd heard something about a deadly top secret mission in Vietnam, and it was scuttlebutt. And and with our commo class, particularly once we got recycled, so we knew all the instructors, and they knew us. And so as you get near the end, they could tell who's going to graduate. And at the end, there'd be a coffee break or something, and we get to talking. Hey, you've been to Vietnam. They've all been there at least 2 or 3 times, like Sergeant Villarosa. And so we're going through this, and they go, look, when you go to Vietnam, you're going to get in-country training. And when you're done with that, get assigned to an A camp. There's operations out there, people just die. And they're going to come out at the end of your in-country training, they're going to say, we're looking for volunteers, but they won't tell you what it is. Don't do it. Go to an A camp, get used to Vietnam. Okay. So we go through our radio teletype training.
That's hearty, eh? Like, far out. Hardcore. It's great that they're getting these tips and this heads up from their instructors, the guys that were taking them through their training. Because, man, they're like listening to this guy, Mr. Meyer, he probably would have been the type to, I'm looking for volunteers, he probably would have volunteered straight away. Maybe he still does. We haven't got to that yet, whether or not he saw people come in and ask for volunteers, and whether or not he put his hand up, or whether he listened to the advice that he got from the instructors and went later. Who knows? But that's probably some gold advice for those that were lucky enough to receive that advice or information beforehand, prior to, and probably maybe even better for those that actually listened to it.
Johnny McIntyre and I, we got busted. We got busted from a private first class to private E-Deuce. Those legs down, they just didn't like us leaving base at night, going downtown to howl the wolves. So Johnny and I got
Going downtown to where?
to Augusta. We called it Disgusta, but Augusta, Georgia.
Disgusta, huh?
Yeah, it's right outside.
What happens in Disgusta?
Well, it was amazing. They had a couple of really cool nightclubs there. You could drink a lot. My dad was kind enough to let me take our Pontiac down there, so I had a car. And Johnny McIntyre and I, we drove down. We were there. So at night, they come by with a base inspection, like at 10:30, all tucked in. We had our clothes on. The second he left, man, bing, we're out to the parking lot. We're downtown. The bars would close at 2 o'clock. And Mac and I would go across the border to South Carolina because their bars there were open till 5. So we'd leave about 4:30 as we get back to base.
We would have got along great together.
Oh, yeah. This is like... So
it must be like Sean sitting across from his future self, and John sitting down looking at his former self before crack up.
At some point during this training, McIntyre and I drove home, and that night we stopped at a bar, and John and I are sitting there on the TV. So this is now the Tet Offensive is kicking in, and we're going through this training, and on the TV, I don't know if it's CBS, but you can see this grainy picture of a tank, and they said this is a NVA tank that broke into Lang Vay, a Green Beret camp, which is in the northwest corner of South Vietnam, right just south of the DMZ, not far away from Laos. And this NVA tank tried to overrun the base last night. Those Green Berets were fighting for their lives. McIntyre and I go, holy shit, we're going to die. When we get there, we drove home, took all our money out of the bank. We didn't want our family fighting over our money if we died. We go home, take all our money out, drove back to base, and every night we went out for steak. We spent all our money. Of course, went to the bars.
Spent it all in Disgusta.
Indeed. There was a little sweetheart down there. John.
What a mindset, eh? I was just laughing at that. When they saw that, they thought, holy heck, when we get there, we're going to die. So they go take out all their money and then just start spending it. With the thought that, some people, I would imagine, would have looked at that and gone, "We're going to die. I'm not going. I don't want to go now." These guys, yep, we're still going, but let's go have a good time and spend our money. Hard case, man.
And he had his girlfriend, and I met this gal. And before we were done with the training, then we had a month leave, and then we went to Vietnam. I arrived in Vietnam at the end of April, 1968.
So before we get into Vietnam, so
Yeah.
are you saying that when they would take these volunteers,
Yeah.
that was SOG?
Yes, absolutely. And they had a couple other operations. By the time we got there, they had the Mike Force, which had been operating since '63. And the Mike Force was the first QRF, basically. And when the A camps would get hit, they would need someone to come in to help them break the fight. And Mike Force was just outstanding. We had a friend of mine, his name was Jack Tobin. He was in the Mike Force, had several tours over there, highly respected Green Beret. Met him years later. He was president of the Special Forces Association, and I was on the Special Operations Association board of directors. We met at the reunions. And Jack introduced me to a friend. He goes, "This is my friend Tilt Meyer here. He was a SOG. Now, in SOG, they'd be out there snooping and pooping, and he was just doing intel work. Yeah, they made some contact with the NVA, but with Mike Force, we were out there hunting for those commie motherfuckers." And that was the difference. And Mike Force would go out. They just had an outstanding reputation. They broke many a siege that the A camps would be under siege by the NVA and the Viet Cong. But that was the difference. But I learned that years later. In this case, we heard the scuttlebutt.
Heard the scuttlebutt.
So we went through the in-country training, which is 3 weeks.
So can you describe what the war was about at that time before you went?
Well, we knew that the Viet Cong, and you heard about all the legends. The Viet Cong is just the peasant fighter, the farmer by day, fighter by night, defending what he thinks is his country. They don't talk about any of the NVA, the communist people that are supporting them, that are in country, that are with a majority of the Viet Cong units. And so we knew, and of course, when we go through some of the Special Forces training, we're told about the communist infiltrations, told about how they're operating. Of course, we had horror stories about what the Viet Cong would do to a village or to people that weren't friendly.
What would they do?
You name it. We had one of our Medal of Honor recipients had, he was in a Special Forces operation. They had gone into a village and worked with the people, the children there for a period of time. And it was, strictly a hearts and minds operation. They would go in, the medics would go in, always do sick call every day, work with the children. They built some schools, other training facilities, things like this.
It's amazing that those same types of tactics and looking to build rapport and relationships, how effective they are, and that they still work. While they were still being used and employed during my time serving, which is more than 2 decades ago. And I've heard operators that were heavily involved in the GWAT that was still from commandos and guys in SASR, that was also a part of, where necessary, what they would do if they rolled into a village and that sort of thing. If they weren't hunting a specific target, they were there looking to then build rapport, build trust, use of medical aid, provision of food, water, etc. So they're powerful things, eh? And it just, I suppose for me, saying that stuff out loud and hearing this gentleman, Mr. Meyer, speak about it in terms of what was happening in Vietnam way back when, not only how effective it is, but also how simple it is. Just the simple things in life, I guess, is where my mind goes. And that for each of us, a roof over our head, a warm home, some food, water, having those that you care about being looked after, being protected. It's and it's not a lot when you think about it, or when I think about it anyway.
At some point, the Viet Cong came in and killed everybody, every man, woman, and child, to send a message to any other village that would think about working with the Green Berets or Americans. They were just profoundly cruel and heartless that way. And, that shook John.
How would they compare to like a...
It's them, I suppose, them killing their own people, right? Like and it's crazy to me how that happens. Even in my culture, the Maori wars, way back when with their sticks and pounamus and patus, and it's just, man, we're not that smart, as a species here on this earth, just looking to kill each other. Don't get me wrong, I think there's a space and a need to have a Department of War, as the US calls it now, or Department of Defense, wherever you're from. But I think that's a necessity because of the way we are, because of how stupid we are, and or because of the agendas and or greed, or just the inability to be able to resolve differences without going to war or taking those steps. But I think that's just always going to be the case.
Modern day
terrorists
like ISIS, Al Qaeda, with their beheadings, they burn people alive today in Syria. They're crucifying people and shoot them in the back of the head.
The Christians there were hurt. I don't know if they would be specifically targeted.
I don't mean just the Christians. I know,
but here, so with
were
the
they
Viet Cong,
gruesome, burning people alive?
They would do it all. During the Tet Offensive, in the town of Hue, which is the old imperial capital, they had killed a bunch of civilians. Anybody who was educated, nurses, doctors, they took a bunch out and killed them, and they had a mass grave, which received not enough publicity. But this is during the Tet Offensive. And we had other cases where they would torture people to get them to come over to their side. If they didn't, they would kill them. And for me, when we get...
How would they torture them?
Well, you name it. They would do the fingernail thing, beat them up, get them to come around. If they didn't, then they would just shoot them. And, of course, the guys that were in country, the A camp guys, they always had to worry about booby traps. Even if you saw the movie, The Green Beret, they had those big punji ambush things where if you walked in it, it would pick you up, and then a rope would pick you up, and your weight of your body would swing you into like punjies that were all coated with animal dung. So when you slammed into it, like in the movie where they picked up the one guy and his body was impaled on those punji stakes, and they had punji pits, and if anybody stepped in it, of course you had the infection off of those. And in my case with Paul Villarosa, our hero, the guy that helped us get through training, he ran the first mission out of FOB4, his fourth tour of duty. He ran a mission into Laos. They ran into a heavy unit. He was wounded, and at some point, he was captured. They killed several other team members, but they kept one American alive, an SF guy we never knew who it was. But Villarosa, they got him, and they came in with a flamethrower and literally burned him alive at the stake. And they killed a couple of other Vietnamese. They torched them too. So when we got done our briefing, we heard about Paul Villarosa. And it was like, that was culture shock to the max. Because he was our hero. This is a guy that did 3 tours, survived all that. And his first mission out of FOB4, killed and tortured.
Wow.
And of course, you always had the story. We had teams where men who had been wounded, they would disembowel them, cut their head off, and stick their head in the cavity where the bowels were.
Jeez.
And the other part was sometimes they would cut their dick off and stick it in their mouth, and then put that in. Now, I never saw that personally,
Any of that?
Say again?
You never saw any of that?
Nothing like that. But we heard about it. And it was from our guys.
Before you went, you heard about it.
Some before, and then some while we were there. Other teams that come up against.
And so the premise of the Vietnam War was the NVA and the Viet Cong pushing communism into Vietnam.
Right.
And so where does Laos and Cambodia come into play?
Well, they were, quote, neutral countries. In the beginning, we had Operation White Star, which had Green Beret teams in Laos. But under that change of plan of converting to MACV SOG, Kennedy, they had an accord of some kind of a political agreement that America would pull any and all combat troops out of Laos and out of Cambodia. And the North Vietnamese and the communists would do the same thing. They were all there and they agreed to this accord. Well, of course, the communists are just lying douchebags, as we all know. And publicly they say, yeah, we're out. Well, in 1957, they had started to reopen the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which went from Hanoi down to Vietnam, across, down through Laos into Cambodia. And there'd be trails that would come in to South Vietnam. And that would be the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And that would be the way that supplies the manpower. And as early as 1957, they began working on it. By 1959, the Politburo in Hanoi said, we are going to form an official unit for the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It'll be 559, May 1959. So that's when it was formed. They had a colonel in charge of it, other people. So from 1959 into the 1960s, they already had rudimentary supplies and manpower coming south, agents, etc. And so we would go, not we, but they would go through that, expanding. And so then the Air Force would start targeting the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And it wasn't just a trail. It would be different branches coming down and going into the country, into South Vietnam. And that's what that was designed for. And so by the time I arrived,
before we go there,
no, sure.
What was the pulse of the country about Vietnam at the time?
Well, we believed our presidents, even that lying scumbag Lyndon Johnson, saying that this is communism. They're here to overtake the country. And we were familiar with the domino theory from Eisenhower. And here's Dwight David Eisenhower, our World War II fame, and a good president. And if he's saying we've got the domino theory, they were of great concern to us, well, we all believe them. And, anything we could do to stop communism, having seen what it was. So the majority of the country, I would say, was very supportive of it. And by 1966, you're beginning to get some protesters. And, there might be other, quote, Vietnam experts that talk about the protests and who was really against it. But I always felt supported from the beginning. And by the time we land in 1968, there's now more demonstrations, some college campuses and whatnot. And but I always felt like they're just so far removed from it. And you never know who's putting the anti-war sentiments in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'm glad I've just been letting it run. I've been really engrossed in this. I just see the time now. It's nearly 30 minutes. But man, there's a lot in there. A lot of stuff that I'm no military historian. I'm no war historian. But picking up on and listening to him speaking about, we believed our presidents, even the such and such a person who he didn't sound too fond of. It's amazing, eh? The words that are used, the dialogue, the narrative, the way things are guided and weaved together to influence not only soldiers, but the public and that sort of thing. Apart from probably maybe the conspiracy theorists out there who probably don't believe the government with anything that they say, there's probably some value to that. But each to their own, I suppose. But it just goes to show, like, that stuff is still what happens. Like all of us, I know for me and the guys that I served with, we believed the talk about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Like we felt that what we were doing was justified. And then knowing that there are other units and other AOs, not specifically where they were, but areas, you get an idea when you're given your area of operation and told to stay out of these areas. You acknowledge and respect that space and those boundaries, understanding that there's likely some other forces there. But for none of us, not the UK, not Australia, not NZ, not the US, for nobody to find any is it was a bit deflating. But anyway, lots to ponder and think. Even as he's speaking, there's lots there around the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the operations and that pipeline or that pathway that was being developed. Like I've heard of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Never looked into it, never done any research. So maybe it's an opportunity for me to have a little bit of a look online and see and get some information where I can. There's obviously the aspects of filtering out what may or may not be true. But those of you out there, if there's those that are avid historians or those that have got a bit of an idea, want to share your thoughts and inputs, feel free to whack them in the comments. I'll have a read of them and I'll respond to you. I'll reply. But anyway, if you made it this far, man, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it, eh? And hopefully you're enjoying listening to this gentleman, John Stryker Meyer, MACV SOG, sharing some of his experiences and memories from what he was a part of. And I'm sure we're going to delve into a lot more or hear a lot more as this interview goes with Mr. Ryan himself. So anyway, that being said, as always, the message is the same, eh? Regardless of your challenges, trials, difficulties, man, I encourage you to keep turning up, keep staying in the fight, put one foot in front of the other and take one day at a time. Know that the sun will shine again and that there are better days ahead. Those better days are closer than you think, and there is a light at the end of that tunnel. So just stick at it. As always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.